By the grace of God, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and good sponsorship, I've been sober since April 4th of 2022. I currently live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I have a sponsor who knows she's my sponsor. I sponsor men and women in this program and people who identify out of the binary. I have numerous service commitments, and most of all, I'm grateful to be here to speak to you tonight. It's a true honor to be here. Um, oh, and I have a home group. It's in Colorado Springs. We meet Thursday nights at 6 o'clock p.m. It's called Next Right Action. It is not a hybrid meeting, so if you're ever in Colorado Springs, we would love to have you. So I have not I have not done my story on Zoom, because I got sober after Zoom meetings. So it's always exciting to be with y'all here at 5D, knowing that this meeting has been around way before the pandemic, and helping people get sober one day at a time. Just a little bit about me. I grew up in East Texas, Northeast Texas, on a cattle farm, and started drinking at a very young age. I started drinking at 14 was my first drunk. I had drinks before then. My uncle used to give me and my cousins sips of his beers and stuff. But my first drunk was when I was 14, and I remember it very vividly. I identify outside of the binary and as queer, and was raised in a pretty masculine environment, and I have never been masculine. Um, and so I remember that first drunk because it was the first time I felt like I had arrived to fit in with my family and the folks around me. Um, and then after that, I came out as uh, queer at the age of 15, so a little over a year after my first drunk. And my when I came out, it was pretty traumatizing. And then after much breaking of rules, I decided to move out of my family's home when I was 17 years old, and I was a junior in high school. And that's when my alcoholism really took over. That's from what I can remember. I don't remember much from living on my own because I was drinking a lot and doing other substances, as some folks would say, outside issues. But, drugs are part of my story, and drugs are part of a lot of people's stories. So, Alcoholics Anonymous saved me from the obsession of alcohol and drugs. So I moved out when I was a junior in high school, and then my alcoholism really took off, and still ended up graduating high school. And then went to get my undergraduate degree in music, and still was in full-blown alcoholism, drinking. And anytime I wasn't drinking, the obsession was real, and I was drinking or using drugs. When I wasn't doing those things, I was thinking about the next time I would get to do it. The phenomenon of craving was always there. But somehow miraculously graduated with my undergraduate degree, from a city in Texas, and then went straight into my master's degree. And that's when I found my love for sniffable alcohol, as I've heard in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I did my master's degree, and still somehow miraculously graduated with that. And then I did that degree in a city about 20 minutes south of Austin. And then I was in a year of limbo in Austin, and it was just party, 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 drink, 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 drugs, drugs, drugs. Um, I remember I worked at a hotel, I in that limbo year, and I just remember so many times just not showing up to work, or making up excuses of why I couldn't show up to work, and then half the time would show up to work on maybe an hour of sleep because I was up all night from partying the night before. So, and I was looking for work. I got both of my degrees are in music, and I was looking for work outside of Texas because I wanted to get out of Texas. and I applied in at a church job in Denver, Colorado. My degrees are in music, and somehow got that job. And so when I was taking that step of action to move from Austin to Colorado, I was like, I don't have an alcohol problem, I just have a drug problem. So I'm going to stop doing drugs when I move to Colorado. So I moved to Colorado, and within 6 months of moving to Colorado, I never stopped drinking, but drugs miraculously, I guess, came back into my life. Not miraculously. I had no spiritual solution. I was raised with this stigma around alcoholics and Alcoholics Anonymous, like being homeless. Homeless people go to Alcoholics Anonymous, or people under the bridge or whatever. And that was what I thought was Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't think it was for people like me. Um, so I tried to stop doing drugs when I moved to Colorado, and that didn't last very long. And so it was just that continuous, insidious insanity, the continuous cycle for a long time. So I started drinking when I was 14, full-blown alcoholism at 17, and I didn't get sober till I was 34 years old. And it was I knew that I had a problem. I didn't know what obsession was. I didn't know what the phenomenon of craving was. I didn't know what a spiritual solution was. And I did not think Alcoholics Anonymous or any kind of 12-step program was for me. Um, and then after all these years of drinking in 2022, what actually brought me to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had received an HIV diagnosis at the end of March of 2022, actually 4 days before, or no, 5 days before I got sober. And at that time when I received that diagnosis, I was in the full-blown AIDS stage. I had 13 T cells when I got my HIV diagnosis. And by the grace of God and modern medicine, I now live an undetectable life, and I'm the healthiest I've ever been due to my sobriety and medicine. Um, so I went on a weekend bender, like any good alcoholic or drug addict does. And on April 4th, I I also do drag part-time. So I was doing a drag show up in Denver, and I was driving back from Denver with a friend in my car, just full-blown cracked out of my mind, just drunk. And I had just started my antiviral medicine. And so I woke up on April 4th, it was a Monday, and I was just like, I can't live like this anymore. And so I made the decision to get sober. I did not come straight to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was over 30 days sober when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had tried to get sober when the pandemic hit. In 2020, January 2020, my New Year's resolution was to get sober. And the pandemic hit, and I lived with a roommate who was sober at the time. And so, I made that excuse. I didn't have alcohol in the house, so I wasn't an alcoholic. It talks about it in our literature. I would make all these excuses. And I stayed sober from alcohol, but I was still sniffing coke. And so, but in my delusion, I thought that was what sobriety looked like. I could do one thing, but as long as I didn't have one thing, I was sober. Um, and then I did a low budget drag reality show during the pandemic in September, and I was sadly the first person eliminated from it. And someone said, "Do you want to drink?" And I had no defense against the first drink, and so I was like, "Of course I do." And that was in 2020. And then from 2020 until I got my HIV diagnosis and got sober, it was just really awful. I now weigh almost 200 pounds. When I got my diagnosis, I was 135 pounds, so I was literally dying. Um, so I got sober, and I had a friend, and I was posting about my sobriety on social media, not knowing I was well, I wasn't in AA, so I wasn't technically breaking traditions yet. But I was constantly posting about my sobriety, and this girl that I went to grad school with would always message me and it's like, "Do you go to meetings?" And I'm like, "Girl, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't need meetings." But she was persistent, and so she kept checking in. And so one day I was like, I just want to get this girl off my fucking back. And so I'm gonna go to this AA meeting that she keeps telling me about. And I went to a nooner here in Colorado Springs, and it was me and five other old men, and I was wearing thigh-high leather boots, looking fabulous because I walked into that room wanting everyone to know I was queer, and I just wanted to prove that Alcoholics Anonymous wouldn't work for a queer like me. And at the end of that meeting, this old man, his name's John, he looked at me and says, "Well, keep coming back." And the next day I went back. And then the following day, I went to the Colorado Springs Young People's group here in Colorado Springs. And for a long time, that group was my home group, and that group saved my life. It taught me what recovery looked like, it taught me what service looks like, and it taught me what unity looked like. It showed me the legacies and how to live those out in the rooms and out of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, so at the end of that meeting, they always say anyone looking for a sponsor, and I raised my hand, and this guy came up to me after the meeting and said, "Do you want my number?" I thought he was hitting on me. I did not think he was wanting to be my sponsor. And and he probably was a little bit, but so I did not ask him to be my sponsor. I just took his number. And then next meeting, I did the same thing. Another guy came up and offered me their number, and I was like, God, I get hit on more in AA meetings than I do at the gay bars. So, and I did not ask that guy, but finally, a guy told me, came up to me and said, "If you want to do this, take my number and call me tomorrow." And I did, and that became my first sponsor. And he got me through the third step. And after I did the third step with him, I thought we were in love and going to get married, and then realized that is not what was going to happen. He was just trying to help me get a spiritual solution like he got. And I realized really quickly once I started my fourth step, I can't have a male as a sponsor. And so I switched to a female, and she got me through my first set of steps. And I just think it's so funny that I thought I was going to marry my sponsor. So she got me through my first set of steps and was the first person that asked me my gender pronouns in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was finally starting to see this solution and see that I did belong, because I was hearing my story when I was told to look for similarities, not differences. When I was able to get out of self and look for those similarities, I was able to realize that I was a true alcoholic. And then I had a problem with alcohol. So fast forward, I at 18 months sober, I was miserable in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because instead of seeking spiritual solution, instead of seeking my higher power who's always there, I was trying to take my self-will back and find a sufficient substitute. It talks about a sufficient substitute in A Vision for You, and I was making anything but God my sufficient substitute. I was taking everyone's inventory in my home group. I was the people that were gonna that are continuously save my life today, help me seek God. I was so resentful at them because of just petty bullshit, because of myself. And so that morning I was on my way to work, and I prayed for God to give me a solution. And that night God gave me a solution. At that same meeting that was my first home group, when they asked, "Is anyone willing to be a sponsor?" My current sponsor raised her hand, and I looked at her because I was already questioning, because she was the only woman I was willing to switch to at the time, because I was so full of me. I wasn't willing to seek out a spiritual solution or help from anyone. She raised her hand, and I just remember looking at her. I said, "Bitch, I thought you weren't taking on sponsees right now." And she just said, I'm feeling feisty tonight." And I said, "Well, will you please be my sponsor because I'm miserable?" And she said, "Are you serious? Serious?" And I said, "Yes, I'm fucking serious, girl. I asked you." And so that became my sponsor, and that is who I'm still sponsored by with now. We went straight into a fourth step and a fifth step because I just was, girl, I was a mess. I was a mess. That first fourth step, majority of the people on my resentment inventory were all people members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I got through that, and then we started on step six in November of last year, step 6 and 7, and I've just been sitting there. I'm still on step 7. We're reading Drop the Rock right now. And sitting in step 6 and 7 for so long has truly saved my life. I'm so grateful that I'm able to sit in it and be able to see where my actions and be willing to talk about the things I do and be willing to talk about the character defects even when I don't see them. My sponsor's great at she's wonderful at bringing um realness to my life when I'll just call and just bitch, bitch, bitch about stuff. And then all of a sudden I'll be like, I just need you to give me an answer, girl. And she never does. And she helps me seek out my higher power and pray and be willing. In the spiritual experience, one of my favorite lines is the last line, before the Herbert Spencer quote. It says, willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials to recovery, and these are indispensable. And while I might have a master's degree, I didn't know what indispensable meant. It means absolutely necessary. So today, where I'm at, I remain willing and I remain honest, at least with one person and my higher power. And I get the beauty of this program. You know, I came in dying of AIDS, and now I get to, when I got my master's degree, it was in music, as I said earlier. And it took me 10 years to go into the profession that I always wanted to be. I always wanted to be a music teacher. And now I just started my third year of teaching music education to elementary schools, the elementary students here in Colorado Springs. But I didn't get that on my own. I got that because I got sober and I get to seek God. And let me tell you, if you're an elementary teacher, you seek God a lot because you have no fucking control what those children do. Um, but AA taught me how to do that. And I get to stay sober while I do it because I know a person like me, looking back at my first step, my life is going to get unmanageable and I'm going to be powerless really fast after that first drink. Because if I'm not seeking God, I'm defenseless against it. If I'm not staying in recovery, in unity, and in service, I'm defenseless against the first drink or any kind of mind-altering substance. And that for me is deadly. To drink is to die for someone like me. And I'm grateful, so grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life and continues to save my life on a daily basis. It's not all rainbows, glitter, and sunshine. You know, it's always what action am I willing to take to make a different way of living, to seek God. Um, because normally I always tell my sponsees, are you willing to change your perspective? And then I'm not. I have to talk to my sponsor to change my perspective. And that's why I'm grateful that we get to walk hand in hand with other alcoholics. And then I have another alcoholic walking hand in hand with me to guide me through the steps that I get to take every day. And to learn to practice these principles in all my affairs. Alcoholics Anonymous is a way of living for me. It's not just what keeps me sober, it teaches me how to live. It teaches me how to live outside the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And for that, I'm so grateful. So thank you all for being here tonight and helping me stay sober another day. I think that's all I got. So for a topic, I would say, what does your emotional sobriety look like and how do you keep it? Thanks, everyone.